They were the biggest band in Southern rock, gold records, packed stadiums, and a future that seemed unstoppable. But at the very peak of their career, fate had a tragic ending waiting for them. Today, we're going to explore the story of Lynyrd Skynyrd and how one flight destroyed their dreams, their legacy, and everything they had built. Was it fate or a chain of warning signs that everyone chose to ignore? Let's begin. It all began in the mid-1960s in Jacksonville, Florida, when three teenagers crossed paths during a local baseball game. They were Ronnie Van Zant, Bob Burns, and Gary Rossington. Their meeting was completely accidental because Ronnie threw a ball that hit young Bob Burns in the head, but that accident ended up sparking a close friendship. Along with Gary Rossington, Alan Collins, and Larry Junstrom, they started playing together wherever they could, from garages to backyards. They called themselves My Backyard, then the Noble Five, later the 1%. Names came and went, but the rebellious spirit was already there. The group already had a determined attitude, even if they did not yet realize they were shaping one of the most iconic sounds of the American South. It was in 1968 when they decided to mock a very specific authority figure. Their old gym teacher, Lynyrd Skynyrd, known for being strict about personal appearance rules and for his crusade against long-haired students. Out of that joke came the name Lynyrd Skynyrd, a playful nod to their teacher's name. By the late 60s and early 70s, the band began touring across what is known as the Deep South, playing dusty bars, roadside clubs, and dance halls. Their music was raw, unmistakably Southern, influenced by blues, country, and boogie. But above all, it carried a working-class spirit. Worn-out boots, calloused hands, and a whole lot of grit. But Skynyrd's true character would be forged far from the stage, in a place they themselves described as hell on earth, as we'll see next. After their first tours and live shows, Lynyrd Skynyrd locked themselves away in a hot, rustic cabin on the banks of Peters Creek in Green Cove Springs, Florida. It was a place with no running water and no air conditioning, where mosquitoes buzzed endlessly and the heat seemed to melt the walls. There, far from everything, the soul of the band was born. They called it Hell House, and for good reason. They rehearsed up to 10 hours a day, under the sun or in the dim light, playing each song over and over again, with no excuses and no interruptions. Sweat soaked their shirts, the strings rusted, but the sound began to take shape. It was inside that musical furnace that anthems like Simple Man, Tuesday's Gone, Gimme 3 Steps, and the immortal Free Bird came to life. Those songs were not just chords, they were cries from the Deep South, stories of working-class life, of the pride that comes from refusing to give up, music that carried authenticity and truth in every note. With that repertoire sharpened through relentless rehearsal and a work ethic that bordered on obsession, their first big opportunity finally arrived. In 1972, during a performance at Funocchio's Club in Atlanta, producer and musician Al Cooper was stunned by the raw power of their live show. He was the one who brought them into Studio One in Doraville, Georgia, where the band recorded between March and April of 1973. The result was their debut album, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, released that September on MCA Records. The album reached number 27 on the Billboard chart, and over time went double platinum, officially marking the birth of a legend. It was there, that their signature sound truly shone. The three-guitar attack of Rossington, Collins, and Ed King, weaving solos like battle lines. At the end of the album, Freebird rose like a southern prayer, beginning almost in silence and ending like an electric exorcism.
I must be traveling on.
Live, that song was not simply played, it was summoned. Every concert reached its climax with its extended coda, as if the spirit of the South were flying free over the amplifiers, carrying the audience into an 8-minute trance. Lynyrd Skynyrd had arrived, and they were here to stay. And soon, they would strike even harder, with a song that would draw a line in the sand and become an anthem. If these stories are taking you back to that golden age of rock, hit the like button and subscribe so we can keep reliving unforgettable moments like this. Let's continue. In April 1974, Lynyrd Skynyrd reached true consecration with Second Helping, the album that included their most famous battle cry, Sweet Home Alabama. Sweet Home Alabama. With catchy riffs and an unforgettable chorus, the song worked as a response to Neil Young, who had sharply criticized racism in the American South in songs like Southern Man and Alabama. Skynyrd fired back with irony, as heard in the line, "I hope Neil Young will remember, a Southern man don't need him around anyhow." But this was not just a clash of egos. The song also referred to the Watergate crisis, one of the biggest political scandals of that era. Van Zant's message was not as simple as many assumed. They were defending their right to tell their own version of the South, without filters and without apologies. That song turned them into a cultural symbol, but it also placed them under intense scrutiny. To some, they were spokesmen for a conservative South. To others, they were working-class rebels with a conscience. Ronnie Van Zant, with his raspy voice and sharp lyrics, was not really a political agitator, but a storyteller of his time. Raw, ambiguous, and real. And as the debate grew, so did the band. Skynyrd toured relentlessly, setting every stage on fire with their three-guitar attack and their untamable spirit. Their third album, Nothin' Fancy, 1975, kept the energy alive, although signs of exhaustion were already beginning to show. Internal tensions and excesses, everything was starting to take its toll. In 1976, they released Gimme Back My Bullets, a more uneven album that reflected that moment of transition. But then came the spark that reignited the flame. Steve Gaines, a young guitarist from Oklahoma with an extraordinary talent. In a very short time, he revitalized their sound and even surprised Van Zant himself, who said that one day Steve would be the leader of the band. With Steve, Skynyrd recovered their edge, their inspiration, and their confidence.
Give me back my bullets.
With guitars held high, their most explosive work was approaching, but also their most tragic, as we'll see next. On October 17, 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd released Street Survivors, their most ambitious album up to that point. On the cover, the band posed surrounded by flames, with Steve Gaines almost swallowed by the fire. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a bold image, but within days, it would become prophetic.
What's your name?
On October 18th, during what should have been a routine tour flight, the right engine of the Convair C-524-0, they were using experienced a catastrophic engine failure in mid-air, forcing an emergency landing. The scare was enormous, but it was not enough to stop the tour. the band knew the plane was old. In fact, Aerosmith had considered leasing it months earlier, but their crew rejected it because it seemed unsafe. And that was not the only warning sign. Jojo Billingsley, one of the band's backing vocalists, called in a panic after dreaming of fire, screams, and a crash. Cassie Gaines, also worried, had already said she preferred to travel by road. But in the daily chaos of a band on tour, the signs were ignored. The machine kept moving. One more concert, one more flight. On October 20th, after an explosive show in Greenville, South Carolina, the band boarded the Convair once again. They planned to reach Baton Rouge, and once there, finally switch planes. They took off at 5:02 p.m. An hour later, while flying over the forests of Mississippi, the right engine failed, then the left one. At 6:45 p.m., the pilot sent out a desperate message. "We're out of fuel." They tried to glide toward Macomb, the nearest airport, but the Convair was no longer responding. At 6:52 p.m., the plane went down among pine trees and mud near Gillsburg. There was no explosion. The fuel tank was dry. Just a brutal impact. Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, Dean Kilpatrick, and the two pilots tragically lost their lives. The other 20 people on board survived, but with devastating injuries. In seconds, the roar of the engines was replaced by the cracking of trees and the harsh reality of the crash. Battered, in shock, and still unable to understand what had happened, drummer Artemis Pyle and two crew members managed to crawl out of the fuselage and walk to a nearby farm. The owner, Johnny Motet, mistook them for fugitives and fired into the air before realizing what was going on. He immediately organized a rescue effort with his neighbors. But the terrain was merciless. Swamps, fallen trees, mud everywhere. Emergency crews took hours to arrive, and even longer to pull the injured from the wreckage. Meanwhile, the news began to spread. By the morning of October 21st, the world of rock woke up heartbroken. Radio stations played Free Bird over and over again. Fans held spontaneous vigils. MCA Records immediately withdrew the album's Flames cover, replacing it with a more somber image against a black background. From that morning on, rock was never the same again. And so, Lynyrd Skynyrd's plane had crashed, taking the lives of several band members at the very height of their career. The tragedy was compared to The Day the Music Died, which took place on February 3, 1959, when three major rock and roll figures, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper, also died in a plane crash in Iowa. In Jacksonville and other cities, fans held vigils, sang Free Bird with tears in their eyes, and radio stations were flooded with calls. In the hospitals, the survivors were fighting for their lives. Lacey Van Zant, Ronnie's father, had to face one of the hardest tasks imaginable, facing the devastating loss of his son. He did it with remarkable strength, and in order not to break the spirits of the injured, he chose to keep the news from them for a while. The pain spread like a shockwave. Days later, Jacksonville became the setting for the funerals of Ronnie Van Zant and Steve Gaines, which drew thousands of people and brought tributes from musicians across the country. Among the most remembered gestures was that of Neil Young, who, despite his famous lyrical rivalry with the band, publicly paid tribute to Ronnie. The newly released Street Survivors became a posthumous album, climbing in sales until it reached number 5 and eventually went double platinum. However, its original cover, The Band Surrounded by Flames, was pulled from circulation out of respect. From then on, songs like That Smell and Free Bird took on a new meaning. They became musical epitaphs. Officially, the band broke up after the crash. The survivors, physically and emotionally scarred, could not imagine continuing without their bandmates. Gary Rossington and Alan Collins, who had been seated near several of those who died, carried the heavy burden of survivor's guilt, that unbearable question of why they lived, and others did not. The aftermath included long rehabilitations, personal struggles, and traumas that would follow many of them for the rest of their lives. The wound, both in the music and in the people who lived through it, would take many years to even begin to heal. Now tell me, do you remember where you were the first time you heard Free Bird or Sweet Home Alabama? Leave it in the comments, we'll be reading. After the fatal crash of 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd fell silent for a decade. The survivors faced physical recovery, emotional scars, and new tragedies. Gary Rossington and Alan Collins tried to move forward by forming the Rossington-Collins Band. But in 1986, Collins was involved in a car accident that left him paralyzed. He died in 1990. Over time, other historic members like Leon Wilkeson and Billy Powell also passed away, making it clear that time would not stop the erosion that had begun that night in Gillsburg. But in 1987, exactly 10 years after the crash, the unthinkable happened. The band came back to life for a tribute tour, led by Johnny Van Zant, Ronnie's younger brother. What began as a tribute soon became a second life for Skynyrd. Combining original members with new musicians, the group returned to touring, recording, and keeping the Southern fire alive. Songs like Free Bird and Sweet Home Alabama became universal anthems, heard in movies, stadiums, tributes, and across generations of musicians. In 2006, their legacy was formally recognized when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The industry called them one of the most important bands of all time. And with more than 30 million records sold, Lynyrd Skynyrd secured a place in history that goes far beyond the crash. The final chapter came in 2023 with the death of Gary Rossington, the last surviving original member. For many, it was the symbolic closing of an era, but the band remains active under Johnny's voice, bringing to the stage not just songs, but memory. And every time Free Bird plays, no matter where, Ronnie sings again, and the South flies once more. Just as Lynyrd Skynyrd lived a story marked by glory and tragedy, another legendary Southern rock band also faced an unexpected fate at the height of its success. Click now and join me as we discover what really happened to Creedence Clearwater Revival. I'll see you there, my rock and roll friend.